calls it a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball. Chris Taylor.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined once again by Anthony Witrado. Anthony, the Dodgers are in South Korea. We've been waiting, and opening day is almost here.
Yeah, let's get it. You know, this was, as a reporter, like, you know, you always were just kind of ticking off the days until opening day. Because one, it got you out of the 2 month, 7 day a week, like 10-hour, 12-hour day drive that you are in. But you know, it's different as a baseball fan who, you know, I don't cover Major League Baseball full time anymore. And so like now it's just like, man, every year since, you know, I've kind of gotten out of the full time beat. It's like, why isn't this a national holiday?
Yeah, seriously. Well, in this year, I mean, 3 a.m. the game's going to be over before work starts for most people. Once the Korean opening day actually starts. But yeah, it's crazy. I see some people chatting. Blake in the chat live from South Korea. So shout out to our guy Blake in the chat. So thank you. He's been posting some pictures over on the Dodger Blue Twitter account of the stadium that the Dodgers are going to be playing in. And so make sure you're following the Dodger Blue account there. I do have to give a shout out before we start. You may have noticed there's new decorations in my house. This t-shirt, a friend of mine, shout out Jake Schween, listened to our show when we talked about a week ago and we were talking about favorite players and I mentioned Gagne and he went on eBay and he found this shirt. Nice. And amazing. So an incredible gift. We found a way to throw it up, but an absolutely legendary shirt. I'm sure, I mean, anybody, Anthony, who's like in the ballpark of our ages or older, that will forever be an iconic Dodgers shirt.
Oh, for sure. For sure. You know, it was funny after that show, the next day, my dad wasn't watching it live, but he watched the next day and he said, tell your friends, thank you for letting you mention my truck and my Eric Gagne sticker.
There you go. It's awesome. It's awesome. Well, tons to get to tonight. Here's the plan. We're going to talk about the travel roster. The Dodgers announced the guys that were all headed there. This is not the 26-man roster that we expect to be the domestic opening day and beyond roster. Obviously, they've got a couple exhibition games, so I believe they have 31 players on this roster. We'll break that one down, the guys who are on the list, the guys who aren't on the list. We'll talk about Mookie Betts. We've kind of touched on the shortstop Gavin Lux conversation from a lot of different angles, but there's a great article from Fabian Ardaya about Mookie Betts specifically. And I realized we haven't really talked about this whole decision and the move from Mookie's position. So I thought Fabian's piece was great. We'll discuss that. And then last, we've got some spring training takeaways. Technically, spring training not over. A couple more exhibitions in Korea, a couple more exhibitions after the season has started as well. But some interesting storylines, stock up and stock down, a segment we used to do on this show, something like that. So those are the plans. And then, of course, we're going to do some questions and stuff. And I've got a great question in relation to Dave Roberts getting an egg thrown at him. I have what I believe to be at least an A- level question. So we'll get to that later. But Anthony, let's start with the Dodgers spring training roster, the travel roster. They announced the travel roster, and I'm going to throw it up here on the screen for those watching via YouTube, just so you can see it. This was the 31-man Seoul travel roster. I'm not going to read all 31 names. You can take a look if you're watching via YouTube, but let's start with the guys who aren't on this. 3 significant names, surprising maybe if you haven't been following super, super closely. Brusdar Graterol, Emmett Sheehan, James Paxton, not on the roster. Paxton, not really a story there. It doesn't sound like, wasn't expected to pitch in South Korea. So they said, don't even bother going over there. Emmett Sheehan, it has come out, is expected to start on the injured list. And then Brusdar Graterol is kind of right in the middle. They're hopeful he's ready for domestic opening day. So as far as Graterol, Sheehan, and Paxton, which of those 3 guys do you feel like is maybe the biggest storyline that's not going to be in Seoul?
I think probably Graterol, for the simple fact that we sort of knew with Sheehan, and we also kind of knew that he probably wasn't going to be on the opening day roster anyway. You know, whether it be he was going to be nudged out or his health, we kind of already knew that. Paxton not going because he's not expected to pitch.
Yeah. So
that's sort of, you know, that's fine. Nothing to worry about there, right? Kind of nothing to see here. The Graterol one though is is the one that's a little concerning, because it's a legitimate injury for a guy who they legitimately hope is on the domestic opening day roster. And I think him not traveling is them saying, look, you stay back at the facility where we have everything that we need to give you all the proper treatment. We need you to get better for when we're back. And so, I think for not that we expected him to, once we found out about the injury, not that we expected him to be in Korea, but I think just the fact that we're getting closer to the domestic opening day and we're still a little unsure about what his status is going to be. So for me, he's the concerning one, because I think he is going to be a big part of that bullpen. And he's a guy that they're really counting on to be one of the pillars there.
Yeah. Just one inning pitch for Brewstar so far this spring. And I think on one hand, we know the expectations for this team are not to win the first month of the season. It's to win the World Series. And a guy like Brewstar, you don't take any chances on his availability early on and take any risks. That said, when you look at the list of pitchers here and guys specifically who are maybe in the mix for the bullpen, Ryan Brazier, Michael Grove, Joe Kelly, Evan Phillips, Gus Varland making the trip, JP Fireeisen, Daniel Hudson, Alex Vesia, Ryan Yarborough, Blake Trinan. Those are kind of the reliever specific guys. This is a group that I feel confident in overall, I would say. But as I say those names, you've got Blake Trinan, who we'll talk about a little bit later, who has been good, but just took a line drive off his ribcage, had a bruised lung, apparently well enough to travel. So that's a good sign. JP Fireeisen, a guy I like, but who has struggled so far this spring. So it just feels like, to begin the season, maybe a bullpen that I felt really good about. Maybe we could be in for a rocky start, I guess, to the beginning of the year. Do you think, is that an overreaction to some spring training stuff, or do you think that's maybe a fair assessment to lower our expectations, at least to start the year?
Yeah, I don't take a lot of stock in spring training performances. What the numbers might say, or, had a bad inning here or a great inning there. I think, though, the one thing for me that is concerning is just sort of the health situation with a lot of these guys. And, you mentioned Trinan, and you talk about Hudson, and, some of these other guys who do have injury histories in the recent past. And this bullpen can be really, really good, but health always seems to be a thorn in the paw for this pen every year.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of, who's going to be healthy down the stretch, and, all of that kind of stuff. And it just feels like, they're not made of glass by any stretch, but you always really do have that concern with some of these names on this list of are these guys going to make it through a season? And, for me, I think that's the most tentative part of this roster right now. It always will end up coming down to starting pitching, but that's every team. That's every single team in Major League Baseball. But for the Dodgers specifically, I think if they start to get, really banged up in that bullpen, the expectations for what the season are as of right now can really start to change as we get into the summer, just depending on who's available. So for me, I really think that that's the it's not so much a concern right now, but it's just the thing that I'm really keeping an eye on.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. It's something just to keep tabs on. The irony being Gratterall may be one of the guys you don't really have a ton of injury concerns about normally, and he's the one not making the trip. One other observation on the pitching side, I'd kind of pointed out, hey, they're doing 2 exhibition games, 2 regular season games. And so because you can adjust the roster and because of the rules with it, I kind of assumed, hey, the Dodgers are just going to take, maybe 3 or 4 starting pitchers and then just load up on bullpen arms. Because, once you actually get to the 2 games that count and you have to have a 26-man roster, normally you would have 13 pitchers, 5 of whom would be starters. You could do 11 relief pitchers. The way they've structured it, I don't think it's going to hurt them. But I guess if there was a minor surprise, even if we're counting Michael Grove as a reliever, the number of pure starters that are on this list, Landon Knack, Gavin Stone, Tyler Glasnow, Bobby Miller, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Kyle Hurt are all guys that are, to begin the year, expected to be starters, not at the major league level, of course, but let's say, Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone are the 2 starters in the exhibition game. Kyle Hurt is still in the mix here. And so Landon Knack is still in the mix. So I don't think this is a big deal. I'm not trying to overreact. That was just a small surprise. And I guess you could look at, well, what other relievers are maybe even on the 40-man roster who are available? Gus Varland is on the trip. So you've kind of dug into the bag a little bit for relief pitchers. But that's kind of one small thing for me. I'm curious, just as we look at this, Michael Grove, Gavin Stone feels like maybe the number 5 starter battle. Do you think the Dodgers have made a decision on that front, Anthony? Or do you think that, those two guys might get opportunities to start exhibition games and see what happens?
Yeah, I think they're both going to start the exhibition games from what it sounds like. I would think they might be leaning towards Stone.
Yeah.
My guess is that they do have a preference. They're just making sure, what happens in Korea is all good and everybody comes out smoothly. When you get down to the end of spring training or the end of exhibitions, that's sort of what it's about. Like,
yeah,
make sure this guy gets out okay.
Right.
Make sure he's healthy. We kind of talked about that the last time I was here, where all, when we talked about rainouts, where it's just like, keep everybody healthy.
Yeah.
That's sort of the position that everybody's in right now. And I think that's where they're at with these guys. I'm sure the Dodgers are leaning towards somebody. Obviously not going to announce that yet, but I think it's probably a matter of them just, getting this experience under their belt and making those starts in Korea as opposed to the backfields in Glendale. So it's a cool thing for both of those guys. And that might have something to do with it too. Like, look, you guys are going to be on this roster. You're going to be in the spotlight. We expect you guys to be able to handle it.
Yeah.
So we'll give you this experience and let you, kind of have this memory and sort of, be on this stage. So that way you don't forget what it's like. But there are some interesting things here. And I think it's like you said, they're kind of reaching deep into the reliever bag to kind of fill this thing out. And also the fact that, guys like Stone and Miller are probably going to pitch in those exhibitions. So I think it's a little bit of both the things that you mentioned. But obviously curious to see how these guys finish out for sure.
On the offensive side, we've got 15 guys on the travel roster. Again, it will be 13 once they get down. And it's a pretty obvious selection for who the 2 odd men out are going to be. Hunter Fiducia, third catcher, gets brought along. That's sort of a break glass in case of emergency situation. And Miguel Vargas gets to make the trip as one of 4 guys classified as infielders, outfielders. I joked on Twitter. I love that the Dodgers have all these categories. You have the designated hitter, catchers, infielders, outfielders, and then they have 4 dudes in a category that is infielders / outfielders. And so, the Dodgers just inventing things. Next year, I can't remember if it was you or somebody else who said next year they're going to have a designated hitter / pitcher category as well on this sheet. And so they're just inventing things, but no real surprises, I would say, to me on the offensive side of things.
No, same here. I do think it's cool, and the reporter in me kind of looks at guys like Vargas and Fiducia and says, like, those are good stories. Like, these guys get this experience to go to Korea with all of these other guys. They get to experience the Shohei and Yamamoto experience in Asia. That's going to be cool for them. Those are going to be experiences that they'll never forget. Right. And so, there is something to that. Organizations who believe that players are going to be part of that 26-man roster for at least a portion of the season, really want to give those kinds of guys these kinds of experiences. And one, to not only see how they react to them, but to also, so that way when the lights do turn on in September or October, or for opening day for that matter, they don't melt under it. And so, there is something to be said about those kinds of things. And so, really happy for those guys that they're going to be able to get to experience this stuff because, especially a guy like Vargas who's trying to bounce back. A touted prospect who, was a little bit disappointing in terms of expectations and how he lived up to those. So, I think this is also them saying like, hey man, we still believe in you. Like we want you to be part of this.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the thought that crossed my mind as you were talking was, if you're the Dodgers, you've got a couple guys in your organization, a handful of guys really, who you want to sort of show appreciation for, but you're limited in the ways you can do it because you don't have 26-man roster spots to hand out. And so how do you tell a guy like Miguel Vargas, hey, I know you're not going to be on the 26-man, but I believe in you. Hey, Hunter Fiducia, you'd probably be on, 85% of most major league rosters after the year you had, but you just happen to be in an organization that's obsessed with Austin Barnes. And so you're not going to be on the major league roster. So the fact that they have an opportunity to say, hey, we get to bring an extra handful of guys with us to have a pretty cool life experience, to go to a place that they might not normally go to get to see the Shohei Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto kind of show up front on the road, and just to be a part of something unique. It's a way to say, hey, we see you, we value you. This may not be your ultimate goal, of course, but Landon Knack, Michael Grove, even if it's not an opening day roster, we want you to be able to experience that. And so, I don't know, like, if that, how much that means to them. Like, I don't know if those guys are sort of in the happy to be here camp and say, this is cool, or if they're guys that find it hard to find positives in anything short of like on-field success and sort of career goals being checked off. But,
Yeah.
I mean, I would say, as somebody who's been to Korea, like, it's one of my favorite places in the world. The fact that you're going to get to experience some of the things you're going to get to experience, I just hope these guys are able to appreciate it and soak it in, because I really do think, just on paper, it's a pretty awesome experience.
Yeah, I don't think the guys we're talking about are jaded enough yet in their careers that they are like, I only care about what my numbers say. This is going to be a cool experience for them. I mean, look, guys like, Mookie Betts and the veteran crew, Freddie Freeman and like, Will Smith, those guys are like, this is going to be cool for them too. They're all sharing this experience, like, almost as equals in terms of like, this is everybody's first time doing something like this. So, really cool. Some of these comments are already off the rails. I saw one that said Blake's looking for an IHOP in Korea.
Yep. Yeah. The Blake food questions in Korea. I had to text him that I heard some bad news that there was some McDonald's internationally that were having trouble. So I hope our guy Blake, I hope that didn't mess up his eating schedule. I saw somebody say, Blake, have you spit any of the food you've tried out yet? I mean, the food stories that are going to come of this, I just hope he tells them. Let's just put it that way. I hope he tells them. So we'll see. But
I need a notebook dump
exactly.
of all the food experiences he's having out there. Someone also said that they found out that the egg thrower was Gavin Lux, and it's not surprised that he missed. Oof.
Yeah, that's brutal. That's brutal.
That's a good joke.
I mean, Gavin Lux is just catching strays. He's not even doing anything wrong in the last 48 hours, and he's still there. So
it's like super bad. People don't forget.
Yeah, exactly. They will never forget. So, but we do appreciate all the folks joining us. A huge crowd already. So thank you on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and those listening after the fact on podcast. Thank you as well. You mentioned Mookie Betts, and I kind of led off at the beginning and mentioned Fabian Ardaya Ken Rosenthal. I said Fabian Ardaya earlier. It was Ken Rosenthal had a great article up on The Athletic about Mookie Betts. And as I was reading it gave me an appreciation for Mookie Betts, and maybe a side of things that I felt like, I mentioned to you, we hadn't really talked about yet. This was a paragraph from Rosenthal's piece, and I'd like to just bat this around. It said, on Monday, addressing Dodgers minor leaguers, Betts acknowledged in so many words that he could flop. But here he is, a superstar with a $365 million guarantee, the third largest in Major League history, willing to move to a more difficult spot on the defensive spectrum for the benefit of his team. Betts' selflessness and willingness to make himself vulnerable, according to multiple Dodgers people who were present, sent the minor leaguers a powerful message. Anthony, when I read this, it's a reminder. Like, Mookie Betts does not need this. His resume does not need this. His sort of, he could have said no. Hey, I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't feel comfortable moving to second. I don't feel comfortable moving to short. And yet it's a reminder here that Mookie's just a different guy. Like, I don't think he gets enough credit sometimes for this, because everyone wants to talk about Gavin Lux. It's like, the Dodgers have one of the best players in baseball who's willing to try out a position he's played for like 46 innings in his total career, had never played above high A before last year. He's willing to potentially look stupid in order to help the team. And that should be a bigger story in my estimation.
Yeah. And I think after the whole, Gavin Lux moving over, that whole storyline narrative that got played up for about a week or so, rightfully so. Yeah. People are now starting to like take a look at the Mookie Betts part of this, as Rosenthal wrote a piece about it, right? And so, look, the first thing I really thought about when I saw what Mookie said, this front office was very reluctant, right, to sign guys to long-term deals. Like, anything longer than like 4 years, 4 years was I think maybe even hadn't happened.
It was like AJ Pollock was the biggest free agent signing for a long time, biggest contract they'd given out.
And so they always said, when we find the right guy, you'll know, right? Talking to the fan base, you'll know then. And Mookie was the first guy, and then Freddie Freeman followed them up, and then Shohei Ohtani, and then Yamamoto, right? And we're still figuring out, we're still getting to know Yamamoto, but I think Ohtani has been in the league long enough and to do what he did with the structuring of his contract, right? So you look at those three guys, the position players who have gotten these long-term deals, and it really their character is really shining through since they've been Dodgers. And this is just part of that for Mookie Betts. He was a quick fit in that clubhouse when he was brought over. He quickly adapted to life in LA, and became part of the community there. That was one thing because Mookie Betts was one of my favorite players before this trade, and I was really hoping that LA would embrace him and that he would embrace LA, and he has, and the fan base has, and so that made me really happy, as a Mookie Betts fan. But I think that this just shows why Andrew Friedman and that front office and that ownership group went, yeah, Mookie's the guy. That's the guy we'll give 365 to, because we believe not just in what he can do on the field, but he's the kind of guy to keep this clubhouse culture alive. Remember, there was maybe mild concern when guys like Justin Turner left about like what's going to happen to the clubhouse culture, because he really was a glue guy there. I think the baton has been passed right off, and a guy like Mookie is helping carry it.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great point. They talked about clubhouse culture. They talked about getting the right guys in. And I think you're spot on, Anthony. I think it's a great point, because it is like the Dodgers have, if you look at who they have handed big contracts to, the first two were Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman. Like those are the guys that they chose. And from a culture perspective, from a selflessness perspective, from a willingness to win perspective, they haven't missed on those so far. Now they've handed out 3 more big contracts this offseason. By all accounts, Ohtani and Yamamoto and Glasnow are not guys they're going to have to worry about, but remains to be seen on those fronts. But as I read the piece, I was like, you know what? I want to just mention this, because there aren't very many superstars who would willingly change positions, move off of a spot where they're widely known as one of the best defensive players in the league, on track to go down as one of the best defensive players ever at the right field position. The willingness to move to the infield, the willingness to play shortstop on short notice last year, and then to take it on full time this year, I think is an amazing, amazing piece. We do have a super chat here from Richard. It's along the lines of one of the comments you mentioned, Anthony. He said, breaking news, the Korean protester who threw the egg at Doc was offered an invite to Dodger camp to compete for the shortstop job. Richard, in light of this, I want to ask, I'll ask the question, and this is going to get the chat fired up. I know it. There's going to be content for days out of the chat on this one, but I texted it to you beforehand. The story, of course, if you miss it, the Dodgers land in Korea. There was somebody in the crowd who threw an egg at Dave Roberts. He missed him. The person was arrested. There's reports that this might be somebody who struggles with mental illness. But this is what a weirdo I am, Anthony, is my mind immediately went to, okay, it's an egg. Nobody was in danger here. But what is the worst thing that you could have thrown at you that you know is not dangerous? Like what's an item of food or something where you say, I know this wouldn't hurt me, but it would suck really, really badly to have this thing thrown at me? That was my question. And I told you right before coming on, I laughed. I looked at my wife and I said, hey, like, this is one of the things we're going to talk about. And of course, she immediately says, did you know that this happened to Kim Kardashian? I was like, you're going to be shocked to know this, Kate. I did not know that something like this happened to Kim Kardashian. Apparently, she had flour thrown at her, which that I think belongs on the list. That's in the conversation, to just have like a bag of flour thrown at you or something. So that's one. I see some people in the chat. A raw egg. Is there a milkshake we've got on there? Anything come to mind for you, Anthony, as far as non-dangerous things that would still suck to have thrown at you?
When we were texting, I was like, I obviously started thinking about it, and my mind went immediately to like the smelliest foods.
Okay, yep, that's a
and
fair
it's
one.
like, okay, yeah, like that would suck. Don't get me wrong, but like a lot of the smelliest foods aren't things like, it's just like stuff you could wipe off, right, and like wash yourself, and hopefully it's gone. But like honey would be really bad.
Ooh, stickiness. Yep.
Like that's got to be such a pain to get off of you if you like have honey thrown on your head, right? That's bad. Like, and then also like I hate mayonnaise. Yeah. That would be terrible.
That'd be like, I would probably gag. I'd probably gag. Hawaiian Kira with a great one. Kimchi. That would be brutal. Talking about flavors and smells.
Raw
I mean,
chicken.
honey. Yeah, raw chicken.
We see that could do some actual real harm, though.
Yeah. Apparently, people in the chat again saying that saying that this is sort of it's a commonplace behavior in Korea, especially in protest, that the person, so it was at the airport. I don't know. Koreans don't throw kimchi. I love that. Yeah, look, I was thinking like something that's a mess. Like, like I'm thinking like ketchup, fries with ketchup on them or something, where it's all of a sudden you just have crap all over you. And it's like what we do. But I'm going to say, Anthony, I think honey is a great call because just the stickiness, that's not like give me a napkin and we'll solve this problem. That's like, okay, now we've got a wardrobe change situation here.
Yeah, I don't even know if that's like even a quick shower thing, right? That's like you got to put some elbow grease into cleaning yourself off if you have a bunch of honey dumped on you.
Absolutely. So Richard, thank you for the super chat. Again, the Korean protester who threw the egg at Doc offered an invite to Dodgers camp to compete for the shortstop job. That is not true, by the way, for those wondering. That is not a true news story. That is just Richard's version of the truth.
I've seen a bunch of fish, variations of fish. I didn't throw a fish, but when I was on the beat, I was covering the Mets, I think, at this time. I'm trying to remember. It was a trip to Seattle. I'm trying to remember which trip to Seattle was. I think that's what it was. Anyway, I was doing a video story about something about Seattle, and I went to interview the guys who throw the fish on Pike's at Pike Place, right? And so I told them what I was doing, told them who I was with, and I had some questions for them. So they were super nice guys, answered the questions, and then they were like, "Okay, you ready?" And I said, "Am I ready for what? Like, we're done here. Like, you answered all my questions. Thank you." No, get behind the counter. We're gonna toss you some fish. And I was like, "Are you serious?" And I had a photographer with me, and the
photographer's loving it. The photographer's like, "This is going to be content gold right here.
You better get back there." So I got back there, and I was dressed like, I had on like work clothes, and so they throw, and they do not mess around when they throw the fish. I mean, it's coming.
It hits you in the hands too. Like it's like you don't have to worry about where's this going to hit me. Did you catch it?
And they kind of give you a quick 15-second tutorial about how to do it, right? And they're like, "Don't let it hit you in the chest and try to do don't do that. Like it's not it's going to come right off of you, right?" Which is my natural instinct would have been to do that, right? Like let it hit you and then try to secure it, right? Don't do that. And so you gotta get it with your hands. You're not gonna be able to grab it, right? But then you bring it in. Like don't let it hit you first is basically what they were saying. And I was nervous as hell because then everybody's watching, right?
Yeah.
and I have a photographer with me. I caught it. I was a complete I caught it and secure, I bear hugged it so it wouldn't fall and I would look dumb. And then, like I said, I had my work clothes on. I had to go to the ballpark after that, and they took the fish off me, and there was just scales and slime, all of that. Was, speaking of wardrobe changes, that was definitely one, but. All the people talking about throwing fish remind me of that.
Yeah, you've got experience there as well, so I love that. I thought this was a great one. Cheesecake wants to know: are these suggestions for how we should treat the Astros in public? I'm going to plead the fifth on that one, but you're not far off. Let's just say you're not far off from this.
It would have to. I would remove the non-harm tag of your caveat of what kind of food if we were doing that.
I love it. Well, let's shift back to baseball. Let's talk spring training takeaways. I've got 10 guys, Anthony, on a list that have stood out to me. Some of these are going to be very obvious. Some of these may be surprising. Now, maybe these were guys that you'd be surprised to have known a month ago were going to be on this list. We'll start with the obvious one. We were talking right before coming on the show. Shohei Ohtani. All I can say is whatever the hype was, it has been lived up to and then some, it feels like.
Yeah, and to share with everybody sort of where we were going with our conversation before we got on live here. Ohtani's a two-time MVP, and everybody was excited to get him into a Dodger uniform and all of that. But in watching the spring training games and in watching the highlights, that first homer, him hitting a bunch of doubles and all that stuff, right? It just it was almost surreal to be like, this guy's on the Dodgers in this lineup with Mookie and Freddie and Will Smith and all these other guys. And it was it was sort of like a reality check of this happened.
Yeah.
Like that was a thing that happened over the winter that Shohei Ohtani signed with the Dodgers, and like you're seeing what it's going to become. You know, you're seeing a preview of it in spring training, and for me, that was like one of the bigger like, you know, because people pay attention to spring training. You know, some are diehards about it, some just kind of coast through it until opening day comes, and I'm sort of, in the middle to a little bit more diehard, but I take a lot of the spring training performances with a grain of salt, but not with Ohtani. For me, that was like, wow, like this could be something special here.
I'm with you. I try my hardest to tell myself it doesn't matter, but when you hear the other guys raving about him, it's like, all right, well, these guys would have the right perspective of what matters and what doesn't, and all the things that they seem to believe matter are trending in the right direction. Another story we don't need to touch on, I think if we're talking takeaways, Gavin Lux is a big one, but we're going to set that one aside because I feel like we've discussed that plenty. Two more on the offensive side of things. James Outman, 1.173 OPS. And when I interviewed Steven Nelson a few days ago, Anthony, he was I was like, who are the guys that people are talking about in camp? And he told a story where he asked Dave, like, tell me what's going on. Tell me who the guys are. And he said, Dave, immediately out of his mouth was James Outman. Like, this guy, year 2, he's dialed in. He's doing all the things we're expecting him to do. And again, it's kind of crazy that nobody's talking about James Outman. Like, this could have easily been, he struggles a little bit in spring. And one of the storylines is like, do the Dodgers have a problem in center field? No, he's handling his business and nobody is talking about him in the best way possible.
Yeah, for sure. I think the Gavin Lux story definitely, I think, gave him some cover.
True.
Because when you have the first world kind of problems that the Dodgers have, where and the media on the beat is looking for storylines, that could have been one. It could have been something that fans really started to focus on. And that would have been unfortunate because I don't think Outman really needs those kinds of questions coming at him. And, he's probably doing all the right things every single day that he needs to be doing. And also, like I said earlier, having covered enough spring training, a guy who might hit 420 might start the season, through his first 30 plate appearances and go, 3 for 27.
Yeah.
Right. And the guy who hits, 112 in spring training might come out of the gates and be player of the week in week 1.
Yeah.
The Cactus League is just really, it makes it very difficult to gauge things or to take them as a real significant preview of things to come for a number of reasons, particularly on the pitching side. But yeah, I think that he's one of the guys that the team's looking at to really break through again. I think he's a guy fans are excited about. He's going to be a lot of people's favorite new player. If he isn't already. He's got a ton of talent, and I really think a guy who's going to be a force in that lineup and probably take the rest of the league a little bit by not the teams, but the rest of the fans. Who don't follow the Dodgers all the time. He might really surprise them and turn some heads if they missed him last year. So a guy who I'm really, really looking forward to see how he reacts to a team that maybe has the highest expectations of maybe any team in the history of baseball, in all honesty.
Totally. Shout out to the viewers, by the way, just crossed 1,000 people watching live. We greatly appreciate it. Love to have that kind of support. Let's talk about a couple more young guys. Offensively, Andy Pages, huge spring, 1.571 OPS. I loved reading Keith Law basically had a note in one of his latest prospect articles saying, I feel stupid already for not including this guy in my top 100. I thought it would take him more time to recover from his shoulder injury. And yet not only is he seemed to being back already where he was, it's arguable that he's better than the last time we saw him a couple years. Again, 1,500 OPS at Major League camp, then was sent down to minor league camp. And, oh, by the way, had 2 home runs the other day in that. So I think Pages is a young guy that was impressive to me. I'll include Gavin Stone in this conversation as well. 9 2/3 innings, 0.93 ERA, 0.62 whip, 9-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio. He's a guy that had high expectations coming into last year and failed, but nice to see both of those guys who I think in a lot of ways were in the same boat for very different reasons. Pages for injury, Stone because of struggles, but former top 100 guys who had kind of fallen off of the top 100 radar. And yet a strong spring has put both those guys back right into the conversation of, wait a minute, the Dodgers might have a future dude here in both Stone and Pages.
Yeah, I think Stone is somebody who a lot of fans are already familiar with, and a guy who I think is expected to contribute to this team this year.
Yeah.
So a lot has been written and said about him. So I'll focus on Pages. I think that for him, there's a real good chance that had to Oscar not been signed, had Jason Hayward been more of a question mark than he is now, and that's not to say he is a huge question mark out there. I'm just saying, like, if right field itself,
some people would say he's a question mark, not me, but I know Blake has sort of openly questioned whether or not that was a move worth doing. I see some people in the chat kind of saying that as well. I think Hayward, if there's a guy that we should ignore the spring training stuff, it would probably be Jason Hayward. And I think for a lot of different reasons, he's going to be just fine. That's my view. But, I don't mean to interrupt. I just think, to your point, I think there are some people that would say Jason Hayward and Andy Pages is maybe a conversation that's worth having.
Yeah. And that's a fair thing to be concerned about. I'm not concerned now because there's not a reason to be concerned yet.
Yeah.
But I think it's fair to have those questions about that. Yes, for sure. To that point, when they sent him down, when they sent Pages down, Robert said, like, would not be surprised if we see this guy this year back in our clubhouse. And I think, in all honesty, it probably is going to happen as long as he, doesn't fall off the face of the earth, in the minors. He'll be somebody that is going to get brought up, 2-3 times, maybe, if he doesn't stick permanently. Just kind of depends on everybody's health and obviously performance stuff. But he is a guy that they definitely see being in their lineup very soon, possibly this year.
Do you think he's ahead of Miguel Vargas? Because Vargas is on the travel roster, both guys on the 40-man. Vargas is probably going to be a corner outfielder, left field particular, this year. I mean, that'll be an interesting move if they do need to bring up an outfielder. Does Vargas get the call ahead of Pages?
It's going to depend on performance.
Yeah.
I think bringing Vargas to Korea says it's yours to lose.
Yeah.
You know what it's like to be here. You were here last year. We expect a certain level of production and professionalism out of you.
Yeah.
This is all part of that. This is all part of that growing and maturation process. I think the Dodgers are helping him along with. But if he doesn't produce, and Pages is, this team has expectations now.
Yeah.
Not in 2 years. And so it's going to be who's performing at the moment that they need somebody. And so that's I wouldn't say anybody's ahead of anybody necessarily. I do think Vargas is ahead in terms of depth chart stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously he's still with the big league club and he's going to Korea. So that says that. But, like I said, this is a win now team. And if guys aren't producing in the minors when it's time to bring somebody up, then you're probably not going to get called.
Yeah. And I bring that question up because, as the chat is showing me, I think that's surprising to a lot of people. And I'm just pointing out, like, how else do you explain the fact that Miguel Vargas is on the travel roster to Korea and Andy Pages isn't? And I'm not saying there aren't other explanations. Like, you could say, well, Vargas was up last year and maybe a little bit more versatility. He's in that infielder, outfielder. I just think if they had to choose, it'd be kind of like, hey, look, Pages had a really nice spring and that's awesome. And we're great. We're super glad about it. He missed a lot of time with the shoulder injury, and the Dodgers might be putting less stock in how good of a spring he had than most fans are. I guess is probably the fair thing to say.
For sure. And that's that's fair on both ends. It's fair for the fans to be clamoring after him. I mean, that's their job. That's what the fans' job is, right? And it's the front office's job to understand nuance and context and all of those things. And they are. If every team brought up their minor league guy who tore it up in spring training and put him on the opening day roster and put him in the opening day starting lineup, there'd be a lot of guys sent down in the first few weeks of regular season every year. And there's a reason why teams don't do this, because, and what I said earlier, you don't take a whole ton of stock into what guys do in the Cactus League or in the Grapefruit League for good reason. That's not to say that he can't, once the lights turn on, that's not to say that he can't do that. It's just that they're not going to base all of their roster decisions solely on 40 plate appearances that this guy had in the Cactus League.
Totally. Totally. Let's go to some pitchers here. Tyler Glasnow, spring training, absolutely dominant. No hits allowed in his final 8 1/3, 13 strikeouts, really good stuff for him. Blake Trinan looked really good. I thought was another guy that just sort of, if we're looking for positives here, survived a scare with that bruised lung. Daniel Hudson, I think, was a pleasant surprise. If I'm being honest, I didn't have super high expectations for a guy that was coming off the injuries that he was coming off of at his age, but 7 strikeouts and 5 1/3. The fact that he's ready to travel to Korea and will probably be on the opening day roster. Those are 3 more guys on the pitching side that I think were positive for me. Again, not surprised with Glasnow. I think to see Trinan be good, coming off injury, Hudson be good, those would be maybe a little bit more surprising. But of those 3, the dominance of Glasnow, maybe the positive emergence of Hudson and Trinan, is there one of those 3 guys that sort of has stood out to you most?
I think it's kind of the guy that we expected to be good in Glasnow.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with how he handled coming over and all the expectations. And those last 2 outings, like you said, were, he looked good. And, I said earlier, like pitching specifically, you try to take the numbers with a grain of salt in the Cactus League. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. The ball is different a bit in the air there. There's a number of reasons, it's starting pitchers' juice level is just a little different in spring training than it is when the regular season starts. Like there's a whole number and sequencing and things like that, right? Pitchers aren't giving their entire repertoire during spring training starts. It's just they're working on certain things. They might be trying to work on a different part of the strike zone, inning by inning or something like that. So even though they may have 2 strikes on a guy, they're not necessarily trying to put him away. Yeah. And so to see what Glasnow did was impressive. Those are, I don't care what spring training league you're in or what those circumstances are. You go 8 1/3 and no hits and no runs and 8 strikeouts or whatever those numbers were. That's impressive, man. I mean, that's really good. So that was something that was a little eye opening for me. The other thing was to see the life on Blake Trinan's slider.
Yeah, so
the
fun.
The filth like level is back to where it was. It looks like, and again, to see that happen in Arizona. Because pitchers will tell you, if you ask them and you don't have a microphone in their face, especially, they'll tell you the ball is different in the Cactus League. It's those balls are not the same as when they go to play the Diamondbacks during the regular season. They're different. And so to see that kind of life and that kind of movement on that pitch for him really is like, okay, he can be again a significant part of the back end of this bullpen.
Yeah. A couple guys that were maybe on the worrisome side. I'll mention the first one because I think we're going to skip right past it because everybody's eyes are going to blow out of their head when I say the second name here. But the first one's JP Fireeyes, and just a guy that I've been super optimistic about. We knew he was going to be out all of last year, but this was a guy that when he was healthy with Tampa Bay, he was really, really, really like back end of the bullpen good, has struggled. I'd hope to see a strong spring. I get all the reasons why maybe that was an unrealistic expectation, but coming off an injury, 8 base runners allowed in 3 1/3, 3 earned runs. Not awesome stuff there. But the other guy who just didn't have a great spring, and I want to say this as clearly as possible before I get blown up in the chat, all right, is Bobby Miller. And I want to say this. I am not worried about Bobby Miller, okay? I'm going to repeat myself. I am not worried about Bobby Miller. I'm not overreacting to spring training. All I'm saying is we're headed for a big season for Bobby Miller. And people are just penciling this guy in as like, he's going to be awesome. He's going to be dominant. He's going to be closer to the Glasnow Yamamoto tier of Dodger pitcher than he is to the Paxton Kershaw Buehler tier of Dodger pitcher. 4 strikeouts in 8 1/3, 2 walks, 10 hits, 4 earned runs. I know it's spring. I'm not worried. I'm not overreacting. It's just going to be a big year for the guy. And maybe it would have been more encouraging had he had numbers a lot closer to the Glasnow side of things than what we actually saw.
Sure. Makes sense. And I don't know him personally, but he strikes me as the kind of guy who doesn't lack for confidence.
Totally.
And so, I think those numbers are what they are. And you can contextualize them if you're him and if you're the team. I'm not worried about him. I don't think it's time to be worried about something like that yet. Every year you're going to have guys who have good springs on, in your rotation. You're going to have guys who have good springs. You're going to have guys who have bad springs. And then, some of those guys who have good ones are going to not look great when the regular season starts, and vice versa. And so I think you just wait. He's also still a guy who's finding himself and who he is exactly as a pitcher. And, the Dodgers have done a really good job in developing him. This is going to be hopefully a big breakout year for him. And he's going to be a significant part of that rotation, especially with, Buehler and Kershaw not going to be ready until, maybe post All-Star break or something like that. Like you said, it's not panic time, nobody is saying that. But yeah, again, it's fans' job to, have those levels of concern, we like to call them in spring training. But yeah, I think he's going to be okay. I think he's going to be fine. I think last year was really good for him in terms of like what he can expect, what his routines are going to be, how to be a piece of a big league rotation and all that comes along with that. Cause that it is a part of the learning curve also. So he's one of the guys on this roster, particularly of the young guys who I'm really looking forward to see how he develops now. Totally.
I think the best way to put it is just keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on it. Like I see people in the chat commenting last year, the concern, if there was concern with Bobby Miller, was the swing and miss stuff and was the strikeout stuff. He was 56th percentile in whiff rate, 51st percentile in strikeout rate. He was a league average strikeout pitcher. So when you come in and you get 8 1/3 spring training innings and just 4 strikeouts, it doesn't mean anything. But you would have liked to see, hey, you know what? He had 10 strikeouts. Like we're heading in the right direction. So just keep an eye on it. Something to monitor early in the season. Again, nobody's worried, so let's not overreact here.
Lots of Yamamoto concern.
Yes. What's that?
Lots of Yamamoto concern happening.
Yeah. I mean, talk to me about that one. I know the last outing was not what people were hoping for. And Tyler Glasnow has probably set an unrealistic expectation for the type of performance we're going to see in spring. There was a report, I can't remember, it might have been in a Fabian Ardaya piece, just about how kind of the second time through the lineup that Yamamoto was being seen a lot better and his breaking ball was in the zone and everybody knew it, kind of a thing. And so those are the types of things they'll work on and they'll work through. But again, to me, I would say, Anthony, in the same category as Bobby Miller. Am I concerned? No. Am I going to keep an eye on it? Because there is a little bit of an unknown here. And it's not to say that the regular season is 100% not going to reflect a little bit of what we just saw there for a guy who's never pitched over here. And so I'm not concerned. I'm not worried. I'm still confident. If I had a fantasy draft, I'd go draft Yamamoto and feel really good about it. At the same time, you'd like to see him pitch like Glasnow in the spring. Sure.
And there's other adjustments that he's having to make, obviously. And so, those can be contributing factors. And also, again, pitchers work on different things at different times during their starts in spring training. Yeah. He may be trying to deliver that breaking ball in the zone. That might be one thing that was a point of emphasis for him. And so, sure, the thing's going to get hit if it stays in the zone, but maybe he was doing that for a reason. You never know. And sometimes they won't tell you even in their post-game interviews because they just don't want to give stuff away and they're secretive like that. But yeah, I think that, some of those hits, there was luck involved, right? Like he didn't have the greatest defense behind him always.
Get used to it, buddy. Get used to it.
Not to bring up a sore subject again, but he's going to be okay. There's also a bunch of people in the chat saying he's going to be fine. I'm not worried about him. I think those people are spot on. There's nothing to worry about until there's something to worry about, and this isn't the time to be worried yet.
Well done. Well said. Let's get to some questions here. If you've got a questions, throw it in the chat. All caps question at the beginning makes those easier for us to find. David threw one in. He said, what do you think about keeping Mookie at short, but moving Muncy to second, where he has said he's most comfortable rotating Hernandez and Taylor at third base? The quote from Muncy was, I believe, 2 years ago when he talked about second base kind of being a position he enjoys playing. It doesn't feel, there's a lot of layers that I have in response to this. It doesn't feel like that's even on the table for the Dodgers. It's also interesting to see Taylor mentioned in the infield. The Dodgers don't really seem to be talking about Chris Taylor as an option on the infield. And I don't know if that's from injury concerns or maybe I'm just reading way too much into comments that have been made. But Miguel Rojas, Kike Hernandez are both guys that I think would get infield reps far before Chris Taylor. So starting with the beginning, Anthony, do you see any chance that Max Muncy ends up moving over to second base in the event that Gavin Lux kind of can't hold down defensively there?
Yeah, that was going to be my question to the question was what are you doing with Gavin Lux in that situation? If you're worried about Gavin Lux's defense at second base and you're replacing him with Max Muncy, I don't see that as being the answer.
Yeah.
It would. I think it would have to take Gavin Lux being terrible on defense, which he wasn't the last time he was at second base, and being terrible offensively, which he wasn't the last time we saw him full time. So, a lot of things have to happen for something like that. Let me say this: if they're in a situation where Max Muncy has to move back to second base, a lot of other things have gone wrong. And the Dodgers are going to have a lot bigger concerns than what Max Muncy looks like defensively at second in that situation.
Yeah. And look, all the reports have been Muncy in great physical condition and, best shape of his life, the classic spring training line. He's another guy who's probably, quote unquote, benefited from Gavin Lux's adventures because nobody's really paid a ton of attention to him at third, where it started out a little shaky. I haven't heard anything negative since then. So he's got that going for him. But I just think Muncy's going to be the third baseman, barring like an absolute travesty on levels that we haven't seen yet.
For sure. Like I said, if he ends up moving off, there's a bunch of other problems that led to that. And this team's going to have, more questions than just that. Look, all you need from Muncy, let's assume that he hits at the level he's been hitting at. And, the power numbers are all there and the on-base stuff is all there. He just needs to make the plays that he's supposed to make.
Yeah.
You don't need anything spectacular from him. Grab the occasional, 7-hop dribbler that's coming in, 1 out of every 3 times or something like that, and then make the plays that you can get to, and he's going to be fine. And that defense is going to be fine, I think, on that side of the infield. You don't need him to be Manny Machado or Nolan Arenado. That's not what you're asking him to be.
Right.
And so, as long as he can be serviceable there, they're going to be fine because his offense is going to make up for any, mobility issues or, balls that he can't get to or anything like that. He's going to be fine. And again, just with the caveat that as long as he's producing offensively, that's not going to be a big concern.
Yeah, I think the Dodgers were 24th defensively in infield defense last year, and they won a bunch of games, and it's look, I think it was Rosenthal who pointed out the Dodgers could potentially have 4+ bats in the infield this year. If Gavin Lux hits the way, has a 120 weighted runs created plus, which we've seen, and then you've got Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and Max Muncy all in there, like if you're playing even league average defense or even, like 30th percentile defense in the league, and you have those 4 bats making up for it on the other side, you'll take it every time.
There is a universe, there is a set of simulated games that you can run that has the Dodgers having 4 infielders in the All-Star game.
Crazy. Yeah. We'll see. This is a good question from Noisy Ninja 91. What would be the reason for not sending Lux down to get right at shortstop? Why not send Gavin Lux down to AAA, let him play shortstop, let him work through things, rather than making what we kind of both agreed is sort of a permanent decision, permanent for now on the Mookie side, but we think it's a pretty permanent decision on Gavin Lux as a Dodger not being a full-time shortstop. So why not just send him down to Oklahoma City and figure out second base at the major league level with somebody else?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can't recall what his option situation is. I believe he has at least one, maybe. Like I said, I haven't looked at that in a long time. So let's assume that he
can. Says he's got 2 options left.
Okay, he's got 2 options left. I think it's just a situation where at this point the Dodgers see him as a big leaguer or nothing.
Yeah.
And even if that means, even if the option is to send him down to get something fixed defensively, I just think that they see him as a guy who, if they're going to send him down for any reason, you might as well trade him.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that's kind of what they see it with as being now. And that's understandable because he's earned a major league roster spot with his bat. And honestly, he was fine defensively at second base the last time he was there.
Yeah.
I do understand the question from Noisy Ninja 91 though, because ultimately a lot of these wrinkles get ironed out if Gavin Lux can just find his way back to being a serviceable shortstop for this team, right? Like we stop talking about Adames and we stop talking about anybody else who might potentially be trade bait in the Dodgers organization. And we say, look, the infield's set, and he's going to be a serviceable shortstop defensively, and he's going to be a guy who can hit. So I understand the want to get him back there. I think the Dodgers eventually want that too. I don't think the door is totally closed. I think it's mostly closed on him being the Dodgers' everyday shortstop at some point this season. But I think I said it last time. They're a few days off. One of those mental breaks that players sometimes will take. For Mookie Betts or hey, Mookie's got kind of a Baki, something. Gavin, you got this series against the Pittsburgh Pirates, right? And he plays pretty good defense. And then all of a sudden you start to go, oh, okay, well, maybe we can move Mookie back to second base, right? Like, crazy things happen. It's a long season. It's a long season. So he may still end up back there. I think the ultimate hope is that he does, because it just answers so many other questions that the Dodgers have had now since moving Mookie to shortstop.
And sometimes, it's like the cliche. Sometimes the right answer is the simplest answer. Maybe the Dodgers just believe that their best chance to win is with Gavin Lux at second base. Like they don't want to send the bat down. If they believe in the bat as much as they've said, and whether you want to believe them about Gavin Lux, I think is a fair question, because they told you how confident they were in his defense and then very quickly moved him off of shortstop. So I'm not sure they were telling the truth, but it's possible they just look and say, he's our best option at second base. That's why we're not sending him down to learn shortstop, is because of that. So,
and I think he is. I think he is the best option at second base. Yeah, and it could be a situation where they told him, this whole permanent for now thing that they threw out there, that had words people going crazy, is that maybe they said this to him to really just get it out of his head about worrying about shortstop.
Yeah.
And then, hey, if in 4 months they need him back there, then okay, we'll figure that out. But for now, I think they just need him to focus on something else, as opposed to the anxiety he may have been feeling about being good at shortstop.
Yeah. All right, let's take a couple more questions. This is a good one. Pizza in the Box. Which Dodger not named Ohtani endears himself to the Korean media and becomes famous in Korea? Glasnow, Kike, Mookie, Blake, potentially. Blake, like they'll get photos of him in, American Tourist eating fill in the blank, I think is where he would maybe become famous. I like Kike. It's a great one. Glasnow obviously looks the part, will be starting the first game. Any of these names or a name that's not on here that you like?
Freddie.
Okay.
He's the All-American boy, right?
That's true. That's a good point.
He's very fan friendly. Let's say he starts out quickly, hits a couple over the fence. That can endear you to the crowd for sure. So that's a good question. I like that. That's a fun one.
Yeah.
Mookie's just really hard. Giants fans like Mookie Betts. You know what I mean? So I wouldn't see why Korea wouldn't love him.
I love it. This question from Richard just makes me laugh. He says, at 3 a.m., what is your go-to for grilling on the barbecue without upsetting your neighbors? Like, who's grilling at 3 a.m.? Who's grilling anything on the barbecue at 3 a.m., Richard? That's my question here.
It's opening day, man. Technically, it's opening day.
No, I mean, I know that. I'm just saying, like, the barbecue is not on my, platter of options when I'm thinking through, hey, I'm going to be hungry. What are my choices? Like, you know what? Maybe I'll throw that filet mignon we have in the fridge. Maybe we'll just go throw that on the barbecue at 3 a.m. and try not to upset my neighbors. I mean, I don't know. Do you have a go-to at 3 a.m., Anthony, for the barbecue of what you're grilling?
Usually if I'm starting the barbecue at 3 a.m., it's because I'm still up from earlier in the evening. And
there we go. I like that. Somebody else saying grilling at 3 a.m., aka still
exactly.
Drinking.
Yes, King Yellow Man. Yes. Look, I'll say this. Given the situation here, you got 2 games on back-to-back days, right? I think I'm gonna barbecue a tri-tip, because tri-tip's usually gonna have leftovers, and then the next day at 3 a.m. you bust that back out.
And are we talking like sandwiches, or are you just going like, is it day one is just straight tri-tip and maybe leftovers you're throwing on some bread or something, or what's the plan?
Day one is you slice it up and You have the tri-tip with whatever side you have. And then the next day, because it's leftovers, you throw it between some hoagie bread and you're ready to go for first pitch.
That's what I'm talking about. Here we go. Dodger Blue. Great question. Great account. Everyone should give them a follow. They want to know Anthony's go-to order when it's late and you've lost all self-respect. And this could be like something you're making for yourself at home. You're pulling out of the fridge or freezer. This could be like you're Grubhub and Door Dashing something late at night.
No, I'm not cooking when it's 3 a.m. and I'm doing this. No. You phrase this as if like all dignity is out the window.
Yeah, that's right? I'm saying it's like you have like there's no fear of like I respect myself too much not to do blank. It's just this sounds good, all inhibition gone.
So like a normal, like let's call it an after bar meal might be the taco truck, right? Okay. But if we're doing what you like, okay, you know what? No one's watching. We're going to Jack in the Box and we're just getting like $10 worth of tacos.
I love that. That's a fantastic. Somebody else said Jack in the Box breakfast. Yeah, I mean, I've like the number of times I've been in a situation where I'm working something until like 10:30 p.m. and I haven't eaten since like 5:30 p.m. And it's just like, how much self-control do I have in like the 25-minute drive home, knowing how many fast food places I'm going to pass? It's like I have to drive past a Carl's, a Wendy's, a Taco Bell, all on my way back to my house. And so it's something in there. I saw someone said like quesadilla. If I'm cooking for myself late at night, quesadilla is a great one.
Yeah,
it's a great, easy one. But yeah, Jack in the Box. Taco Bell's probably my answer. Like, just give me one of those cheesy gordita crunch with the boxes that it's like, then you get the 5-layer burrito, also maybe some nachos.
There's still a little dignity in that order though. Like,
I mean, maybe
Jack in the Box tacos, man, are just a straight up grease ball with some cheese on it.
Yeah.
Which I'm not even sure is real cheese.
Yeah. Or real anything, but they're delicious. So I like that. We had another great question here. Who on Dodger Blue staff most likely to fall asleep while watching either of the Korea games? I just love that Matt, I believe, in the chat says that Blake is the correct answer, which is problematic considering that Blake is actually going to be covering.
He's going to be in the press box.
Yeah. I will say, Derek, the answer for game 2 is going to be me, because the game 1 is Wednesday morning. I'm actually flying to Las Vegas on Wednesday night. I do an annual trip to go to Vegas for March Madness opening weekend. That is day 1. So I can assure you where I'm at 3 a.m. the morning after flying into Las Vegas, knowing I have 12 hours of college basketball ahead of me, I'm making no promises on the mental capacity that I have for game 2. Game 1, I'm dialed in. We're going to be doing a live post-game show. I don't even know what the details are. It's going to be a 7 a.m., 6:45 a.m. live post-game show, which is going to be absolutely insane. But I might take me as most likely to be asleep for the second one. So, and I see Mr. Classic says Spiegel, correct. That's a good answer. I would, he says, told you on that one. So DJ says, I get Jack in the Box tacos with tomato and add their ranch. I haven't done that. I mean, I can't say that's a bad idea, but
yeah, that's not an order I've ever had, but that's good to know.
Yeah, there you go. There was one other question.
Jack in the Box tacos are so bad that they're good.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
That's totally. Here we go. Here's one last question for you. What's Anthony's number 1 Dodgers collectible and favorite Dodgers moment?
I'll answer the Dodger moment first. When I got to Milwaukee to cover the Brewers, the first story I wrote was sort of an introduction to myself. So I wrote a column for the sports section there at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. And it was about like how I got into like how my fandom for sports in general started. And the story was watching game 1 of the '88 World Series with my dad.
Love it.
And I remember sitting, he's watching it and he's sitting on the couch. And I remember I was like 7 or 8 at the time. And I was sitting on the floor next to the couch. I remember this happening. And then Kirk Gibson hits the home run. And so that was probably really the first real sort of vivid memory I have of watching sports. And so that's easily my favorite Dodgers moment and probably my favorite sports moment. Kobe. So there's some Kobe stuff that's in there up high too. But
Yeah.
like I said, that's the first one for the Dodgers and probably my favorite. I'm not a big collectible guy, but for Christmas in 2020, my in-laws got me a kind of a shadow box thing that's up in my garage now that has the ticket for the clinching game of the NLDS, the ticket for the clinching game of the NLCS, and the ticket for the clinching game against the Rays in the World Series.
That's awesome.
And they're all mounted. And then there's like a little plaque that says, 2020 World Series, Dodgers, da da da. So that's a really cool one that I really love, because aside from '88, that's the only time I've ever seen the Dodgers win a World Series.
Yeah. And I've told people this story before. I was born about 3 weeks after the 1988 World Series. So, the joke that I make is my mom was pregnant with me at one of the World Series games in 1988. So technically I was there. I was physically in Dodger Stadium, but anything 2020 related, I think is a great one.
So I have, is there another little thing to this? I had a weird superstition for a very long time, basically my entire adult life, where like I didn't wear any Dodger stuff. Like when I would go to games as a fan, like I had Dodger hats, but they were always in the closet. I never really wore them. And I'm a hat collector, so I have a ton of, I have all 30 Major League Baseball team hats. But when they won in 2020, my wife bought me this one.
I love
it was just exactly that one with the World Series insignia. Then I bought the opening day one with the gold trim, of course.
Yep.
And now I think on the show the other day, I had on the All-Star game one, the black and gold. And I have one of the camel ones from the Memorial Day weekend stuff. So since they've won in 2020, my Dodger hat game and my Dodger, gear has been brought back out. I'm comfortable wearing it again. I don't know why it was a weird superstition for me, but I'm kind of off of it now. So the collectibles are these World Series hats that I really do love.
No, it was like when the Dodgers won the World Series in 2020, you could have Nike could have just sent me emails with like 18 items in it, and it was just going to be an absolute disaster. It was like by the time Christmas arrived, I wasn't even waiting for anything. It was like, if there's stuff I don't have, like, great. I've got the like yearbook, kind of thing here. I've got the hat, as you mentioned, that was one of my favorites. I have multiple shirts. I went out and bought the Corey Seager bobblehead where he's holding the World Series trophy in that. And then,
that's a good one. Yeah.
Behind me, I've got newspapers that are framed and all sorts of stuff. So
I bought the LA Times.
Yeah.
I bought the LA Times that day. My birthday's in November. So
okay. Mine too. November what?
11th.
Oh man. Okay. You don't have you don't have the ultimate Dodgers birthday like I do. So mine's November 23rd, which is Gavin Lux's birthday. And at one point there were 3 Dodgers.
Do you really want to claim that right now?
No, I know. At one point there were 3 Dodgers on the active roster that had the same birthday. And it was Gavin Lux, Justin Turner, and Ross Stripling, all November 23rd birthdays. So I was like, There you go, Nice. But anyway, so
I got plenty of Dodger World Series champion shot glasses too. So for those 3 a.m. Jack in the Box nights, those come in handy too.
There you go. Look at this. We found another November 23rd birthday in the chat. Looks like we've got a November 11th. Lots of November people. So there you go. And yeah, Matt commenting, you're gonna have to chat with Blake. This is a conversation for another show, but Blake has gotten crap. I will say he has gotten crap from us for owning, like, talking about how cool this Diamondbacks hat he has is. But it sounds like, Anthony, you own a San Francisco Giants hat.
You'll love the fact that that's the only one I've refused to buy.
Okay, good. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I should make it.
I should make it
29 other teams. I should make it 29 teams total, including the Dodgers.
Okay, and I guess if you told me you bought an Astros hat like before the whole Astros scandal, like there's ways you could get a Giants would be the only one that I think I would struggle with.
So when I was on the beat, every time the first time I went to a new city, I would buy that hat. So way before 2017, I did have a Houston hat, because when I started covering the Brewers, the Astros were in the NL, so I'd go to Houston like 4 times a season.
There you go.
I'm surprised I haven't burned that. Actually, I don't even know where it's at. I would have to look for that particular one.
Yeah, look, again, I think you could justify it as with the story you just told. We've got some people in the chat saying we almost disowned Anthony, and I was afraid to ask you that question on the air. And even if you were lying, you did a great job lying about not having a Giants hat, because I was like, oh man, I think that means he has one. But like I said, it's become a running joke on our staff because Blake is also a hat guy, and some of us are just like, why are you going and buying a Padres hat? Like, look, so there's lots of hats I can get behind, but
Yeah.
and I get kind of having to have the complete collection, but as long as it's not a Giants hat, I think that's where I draw the line.
No,
Astros
yeah,
hat
that was
2017 and Giants hat ever.
I should have made that clear, particularly on this channel, that is the one that is lacking.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us here on Dodger Heads Live. Thanks to Anthony for joining us again as well. Been super fun to have you on this show. And we got tons of content coming. Make sure you stay tuned to this channel. Blake Williams, staff member with us over at DodgerBlue.com. He's in Korea, so check out his social media accounts. Check out the Dodger Blue account. Tons of content coming from all the stuff that's happening in Korea. He and Scott are going to be recording a video kind of with a quick update on Blake's time in Korea. Scott is not in Korea, but he will be helping with that video. There will be a live show again on Sunday night. We'll have a live show on Tuesday night. We'll be doing a live post-game show on Wednesday for sure after opening day, as well as tons of other content. We're going to have Scott Kaplan of ESPN Radio. We're going to be interviewing him next week to get a little bit of a Padres angle there. Mike Petrello from MLB.com is going to be on as well. So tons of content coming in the next week. So make sure you stay tuned and check that out. You can check Anthony's stuff at Witrado over on social media. I am at Jeff Spiegel as well. And of course, as we always say, if you're a podcast person, Apple, Spotify, and Google, search for Dodger Heads there as well. Enjoy the rest of your night, folks. As always, go Dodgers.